stream live to Rumble on January 9th at 4 p.m. And it will also stream over to Twitter, but we will not be like the normal Twitter where we ask questions and all of that stuff. Because frankly, I don't know how to do that. There's some fancy.
Hello, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great day.
Hey, everybody. I'm just talking, and it kicked me out when I came back. Uh, it had my mic off, so sorry about that. So, January 9th, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we will have Paul Williams on the show, and we will be on our podcast and stream over to X, but we will not be live on X where we can open up for questions and stuff like that. There will be a live chat on Rumble. So if you have all this fancy equipment and stuff like that, I'm sure you can do both. I just don't know how to do that. So, and it's just me. What I do now with two things with Rumble going live and X is kind of maxed me out. So anyway, I could not be more excited. Wonderful conversation with him this morning. Told me lots of little anecdotal. I don't want to kind of spoil it for you guys. I'd rather you guys hear some of this from him. But it is going to be a crazy show. We have so much in common. Okay. So what I thought I would do, just because of the news of Jimmy Carter passing, I thought we're going to skip our chapter today and we're just going to talk about this. So you guys can go ahead and come up and ask for a mic if you want, because we're going to just basically have an open conversation. I am going to present some information though. And first of all, I'm going to ask you a question. So we have recently discovered, most of us recently, there's some people who've known for decades that our government lies. The CIA is not anything to do with intelligence. And basically, the movie that people refer to has been our entire life because none of it's actually been real. The media is not real. The movie industry is not real. The music industry is not real. It's some projection of what they want us to believe it is. It's not what is actually real. And the wars that we've been in, none of which is actually what they told us they were. So I find it funny that we now all know this, that's in this space, right? When do you think they started lying to us? Obviously, they've been lying to us since at least World War II. We've proven that unequivocally with our research. So you still have the people that come and go, well, Jimmy Carter was still the worst president. Well, who told you that? Did the same people that told you he was so bad, aren't those the same people that told you Reagan was so good? Yes. Yes, it is. And so if we've proven that they're wrong about Reagan, does that mean some aspects of what we have been told about Carter has to be a lie? Because they don't tell us the truth about anything. Well, I just saw Stellar and I handed her the co-host thing and then she disappeared. So Bridget, interrupt me if she comes back. Maybe I knocked her out. Okay. So I wanted to, thanks to Bridget's research this morning while I was goofing off talking to Paul Williams on the phone, I want to go about his, a little bit about his history. And Cousin It did just chime in and say that Carter, during the whole Bush envelope fiasco, didn't get an envelope, right? So something's weird up with the whole thing. And of course, I said this morning, because this is exactly how they do this. That they would schedule his funeral between now and the 6th to disrupt the January 6th proceedings. And they just announced that they're going to do it on January 6th. Well, how are you going to do it on January 6th if everybody's already busy? So it obviously allows them to plan chaos in Washington, D.C. under the guise of quote unquote preparing for a state funeral. And
just wanted to interrupt for one brief second. From what I understood, they were talking about laying him out for 8 days. And that has never been done before.
No.
Even though 12 presidents have been laid out in the
laid out. I think I don't think it's actually called laid out, Bridget. It's like you're filleting a buck here. It's like you're, huh?
It's totally bizarre. I mean, I mean, the longest a president has ever been, for a viewing or whatever, for 3 days. Why would you do it for 8 days? There is only one logical reason: to disrupt the whole thing.
So 8 days from the 6th gets you into striking distance of the 20th. And that's kind of the entire operation that we're seeing unfold here. And this is all very, very interesting. And if any of you guys are in the audience and you're like, yeah, he's been dead for months and they're just waiting for all of this, I understand that's out there, but I don't tend to pay homage to any of that stuff because we have no proof. Now, if any of you guys have a death certificate or something where he's been, as Bridget says, laid out for the last month or two, then you're free to talk about that. But I don't like that type of speculation in our space because I don't think it lends credibility to our overall message, which is corruption. And we like to stick to provable facts. And is that a possibility? Anything's a possibility with these people, okay? But let's try to stick with the factual information. So what I want to do first is just basically go over the nuts and bolts of Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter started off, well, he went to the Naval Academy. I know that he went to school other places. He actually background is in nuclear. He studied nuclear physics and he was on nuclear submarines. Once he got his commission into the Navy in 1946, he spent from 1946 to 53 in nuclear subs. He only left the Navy when his father died and he had to go home and take over the peanut farm. And so from 1953 to 1971, about 18 years, that's all he did. He was a farmer, a peanut farmer. In 1963, he did run for state senate and he farmed that entire time. That's not all he did. So from 63 to 66, he was a state Georgia senator. And he resigned his position in the Senate to run for Georgia governor, but his initial race, when he ran, he lost. So in 1970, 4 years later, he ran again, and that's when he was elected to be the governor of Georgia from 71 to 75. And so in 74, the year before he was leaving the governorship, he announced that he was going to run for president. And it's funny to go back and look at some of the headlines, which I did this morning. And they were like, Governor who? Jimmy who? Because he was not a very well-known governor. And it was interesting because that's kind of the same thing that happened this year with like the North Dakota governor. Everybody was like, who's that? So he was not very well known. And don't you know that when he ran and was elected as president his first time around, which is very unique as well, he won by 50.1% of the overall vote. Of course, that's not how you're elected. He won 279 electoral votes to 240. And I did pull up an electoral map, and it is very interesting because the entire western half from, there's pretty much a line that goes from the east edge of North Dakota all the way down to the east edge of Texas. So that entire left part of the country, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, everything except for Texas went red. Everything, California, Oregon, Washington, everything's red, except Texas. Texas went blue for Jimmy Carter. And you have Minnesota and Wisconsin that went blue, but you have Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa all red. Michigan's red. And then you have this kind of horizontal blue line from New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. All of them are blue. Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, all blue. And weirdly enough, I think it's the only time I've ever seen Connecticut red. You had Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New Jersey, Virginia, and it looks like Delaware was blue. That's just a little tail end of Virginia hanging out there. Was red. So Maine was red, Virginia was red, and it was a crazy electoral map at the end of the day. So that's his run for president. He obviously wins. Day one, when he won, he pardons all Vietnam draft dodgers. He did that on the day he took office. Now, what I find interesting about that is because Jimmy Carter was very anti-Vietnam and believed that all of the people that was in the original anti-war movement, not the hippie CIA portion of it, legitimately had concerns over the cause of the war and the cause for the war. So he was very sympathetic to anyone who did not want to participate in what we all know now to be a mass slaughter of Vietnamese people, all for opium. And he took action on that and basically pardoned all of them. And you can think about that however you want. Okay, so September.
Can I interrupt you for one brief second? I wouldn't accept. Some people are saying the sound's coming in and out. If anybody in the can say yes, it looks like yep. We got one yes, but the sound was going in and out. So is the sound okay? Can you guys give us a thumbs up?
Okay, I'm gonna change that mic. I had it changed to what you had told me, so I changed it back to automatic, and we'll see if that works.
Okay. I'm gonna say that I'm hearing you fine.
Okay.
Maybe a safe thing.
All right.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So I decided to be brave and come to speaker to see if the sound would be better, and it is better up here. So
okay,
for
Sarah,
the listeners, there is a problem.
Sarah, can you go ahead and go back down and check the sound out now and see if it's not better for you?
Sure.
And then we'll bring you back up.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyway, I'm going to go ahead because she can just
go ahead.
Because I want to get through his background. So, so in September 77, he signs the, okay, so he takes office January of 77. So in September, so very early on in his presidency, he has the Panama Canal Treaty finished negotiating. And the point I made earlier is that this treaty was originally agreed to be renegotiated during the Johnson administration, which, as we know, was mid to late 60s. So, you know, we're 10 years into this and 4 presidents later, because it was Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and now Carter. So all of those presidents has worked on negotiating the Panama Canal Treaty. It was not just Jimmy Carter. All right, let's check with Sarah. Sarah, was that better?
No, it wasn't.
All right.
I'm sorry.
So I don't.
Maybe you wait when I try and reset the space.
I don't know what that
Go out
means.
and come back in.
Okay. All right.
Sarah, do you have any updates on your phone or on X? Maybe that might be.
Right on.
Okay.
It's funny because we'll break through the algorithm and then it just starts trying to clamp back down on us.
All right. So I'm going to remove.
And then with that said, would everybody please repost the space, do some explosions or whatever, so that we can have a text repost, and hopefully we can break the algorithms even more, because Colonel Towner tells us all kinds of bombs, connecting dots, and this is going to be fire.
Okay, so I put her back down and see if she can give us a thumbs up or whatever. So again, within the first few months of his presidency, he has finished, and again, I can't like foot stomp this enough. So this Panama Canal Treaty has been in the works for over a decade by the time Carter gets into his presidency. Okay. And so he agrees to this final draft and submits it to the Senate, who ratifies it the very next year in 78. So this is not a Carter giving away of the canal. This is a decade plus long negotiation through 4 administrations. A final draft gets submitted to the Senate, who can override it, but they don't. They ratify it, and it is now basically a treaty, longstanding. So a year later, in September of 78, he meets with Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin to sign a peace agreement, which was historic at the time. But keep in mind, Anwar Sadat was basically, you remember, we just recently talked about that in the Prelude to Terror, that we basically installed him. And so it's a very interesting new twist on that peace accord, because of course we're already behind the scenes dealing with Israel all the time. We've spied on Egypt the entire time with crypto AG. And, you know, so there's this quote unquote peace accord that's signed a year later by Jimmy Carter. All right. So, but again, that's going to technically piss off a lot of people in the Middle East, because at the time, the Saudi Arabia faction, which of course is where all the oil is, the Iranians don't want Egypt being friends with Israel. So you can see just within the first year of his presidency, he's racking up enemies. Now, after he signed the Panama Peace Treaty, which gives back that 10-mile strip of Panama, which is where the military bases is, which means the CIA training base at the School of Americas and all that other shit's going to go by the wayside, right? There are crypto AG facilities on one of those bases. That's going to have to go too. So Just by him signing the Panama Canal Treaty, he's pissed off the CIA in multiple ways. Okay, so that's September. In October of 77, on October 31st, his new CIA director fires about a third of the CIA and almost 100% of the covert operations that's been doing regime change all over the world. So in his first year, he has totally destroyed the CIA and their operating capability, both short term and long term, as far as he's concerned. Now, we all know that all they do is take that covert thing and move it outside of the CIA into an entity called the Enterprise. Because remember, we just learned all about that with Edwin Wilson and his fake companies and all that other stuff that they were doing to weapons and drugs and all this other crap. They continued to do it, but it was not done in the CIA because Jimmy Carter basically wiped out their entire covert operations. So we fast forward to the peace accord, which is going to take off the Middle East. Then you have June of 79. He's working with the Soviets not to increase, like Reagan does when he comes in, the manufacturing of weapons. He actually wants to reduce not just conventional weapons, but our nuclear weapons. And he is working and actually making progress with the Soviets, who are very distrusting of the United States, and basically kind of held him off at arm's length because of the history that had went on with the Soviets. And so, but Jimmy Carter is negotiating in good faith to get the SALT II treaty done and begin a reduction in our nuclear weapons capability as well as conventional, which of course had to piss off the entire military industrial complex, plus the CIA, who siphons weapons off of all of those shipments. So nothing like making friends and pissing off your enemies. So later that year of 79, in November of 79, the Iranian hostage crisis happens, and you have the overthrow of the Shah, and all kinds of crap goes down. Now, again, in hindsight, with the fact that much of the elements that were involved in the overthrow of the Shah, there is nuances of the continued dealing with the CIA via the Iranians that really gives you pause as to whether or not this was just another person that was a new face to the government in Iran, because the CIA still maintained all kinds of open avenues of communication. It's not like supposedly Cuba, where Castro comes to power and everything is shut down. Because remember, we go on and we have the Iran-Contra, where Israel now acts as a cutout for Iran in dealing with the United States. So we're still dealing with Iran. We're still giving them weapons. We're just doing it through Israel. And there are a lot of people, I don't have any proof of it at all. There are a lot of people that believe that it was not unknown to the US or to Israel what was going on inside of Iran that results in the Ayatollah coming to power. So we'll just leave that at that. So anyway, that causes obviously a bunch of problems. Now, the next year is election year, 1980. In April of 1980, mysteriously, there begins a boat lift to the United States from Cuba. And it is well known that that boat lift is emptying out all of the criminals in psychiatric wards from Cuba and dumping them into the United States. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Does that sound anything like what's happening right now in the destabilization of our country? I don't know, but I think that's a very going back over this morning. I'm looking at this going because I just left Florida. I just enlisted in 1979, and I'm very familiar with the whole boat lift thing. And I'm like, son of a bitch, I forgot all about that they were actually criminals and psych ward patients, and it was all over the news back then that we knew that he had basically opened the jail cells and was importing all of those people to the beaches of Florida. And just again, I'm having deja vu here because isn't that exactly what Trump was saying Venezuela was doing? So it's already been done, and it's been done for the exact same reason as far as destabilization. So I do see a hidden hand in some of this. So also, April of 1980 is when we have the failed hostage rescue to get the hostages out of Iran. And again, if you go back and you look at many after like 10, 15 years articles that were published about that attempted rescue, every single thing about it seemed like it was sabotaged, like it was meant to fail. But back then, nobody would ever think our government capable of doing something like that. So in October of 1980, in the same election cycle, you have the October surprise where Bush is negotiating with Iran to keep the hostages past the November election in order to then release them once Reagan gets into office to kind of kickstart his presidency, which of course happens. And we have the November election and he loses, strangely enough. He then goes on in 1982 to set up the Carter Center. In 84, he started his famous Habitat for Humanity program. In 86, he announces his presidential center in Atlanta. And in 89, he starts this new election monitoring apparatus. And he just so happens to be in Panama for the Noriega election in 1989. And then he works with Gorbachev in 1992 to set up the Gorbachev Foundation. In 94, he works with Haiti after the failed CIA coup and all of the unrest there to bring Aristide back into his presidency after the CIA had overthrown him. And in 1994, he was in Bosnia trying to negotiate a ceasefire there. In 95, he's in Africa on peace missions. Clinton gives him the Freedom Medal in 99. He visits Cuba, which was the highest ranking person since Castro had taken power to visit Cuba in 2002. He also wins the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. Then he started this weird thing that I barely got any research done on this, but it is very weird. It was called the Elders, and he organized it with Mandela, who we know is kind of a kept man. And he basically is involved in that for as long as he's coherent from 2007 on. And he met with Hamas. He went to North Korea. And weirdly enough, in 2015, it was in Guyana for their elections. I just think he's got a weird choice given Operation Gladio and Condor and all of the places that we visited. He has a very interesting choice of places that he visits, in my opinion. But I'm admittedly jaded when it comes to this. And he had a really weird role in 2020. Him and his organization of election integrity monitored the Georgia election. And this is an actual quote. He's saying that the Georgia election in 2020, quote, was a new era of democracy. unquote. And he supposedly told people that he was going to live long enough to vote for Kamala, which evidently he did, but we don't know that he did that because it was done through a mail-in ballot. So who knows who filled out his ballot. So going back to his presidency, I want to just talk about a couple of other highlights. He implemented a thing called the Emergency Natural Gas Act, which deregulated natural gas in America. That was not something that was very welcomed by the international syndicate because they hate it when anything gets deregulated, because they thrive off of the regulation because it keeps competitors out of the market. So Cyrus Vance is immediately dispatched to the Middle East to work on that peace negotiation. And like I said, he talked to the Soviets immediately. But I did do a little video on the Reorganization Act because that one was fascinating to me. If you go back and you read some of the articles about the Reorganization Act, it looked a lot like Doge. They basically were focused on the inefficiency and duplication of functions within the federal government. And he proposed, and it was passed in 1977, the first year again that he was in office, when he was changing all this shit and evidently pissing everybody off. And he named Burt Lance his project manager for the reorganization, kind of like the role that Elon Musk and Vivek is doing. Burt Lance then is immediately set up, whether it's legitimate or not. You guys can go back and read some of the videos that we've done on this. But Burt Lance get enmeshed in the CIA front bank of BCCI buying the bank that he owns in Atlanta. Now, the story we're told is that he was in financial trouble, and he was best friends with Jimmy Carter because Jimmy Carter's farm loans was through his bank, which means when the BCCI buys Burt Lance's bank, which they did under false pretenses because of Clark Clifford, it lands Burt Lance basically in a compromising position because Carter's farm loans are with Burt Lance, and then they become owned by BCCI, which is owned by the Saudis, the UAE, and Pakistan, which means now they could call Carter's loans on him anytime, because they're with the BCCI owned bank, which is the CIA bank. You see how all of that works? So the CIA basically owned Carter's loans to his farm through Burt Lance. And then Burt Lance gets named as his Reorganization Act guy that's going to change the way the whole federal government. No, by the way, we're going to fire all the covert CIA people. And then Burt Lance gets fingered as being the bad guy in the loan and basically knowingly selling his bank to BCCI front company, which he had no idea. So it makes everything look really weird when you go back and you start looking at this. So he also implemented a national fuel energy plan, which said every year that if you don't meet the energy savings goals, that the gas tax nationally was going to go up 5 cents. And that was not liked by anybody. He had a lot of NATO dealings, and his first address to NATO was advocating arms control and for everybody to reduce their military posture as opposed to an arms race, which would come later under Reagan. Also, he got into a squabble with the international syndicate when it came to mining. He did not believe it was good for the land to do surface mining. And he basically was going to try to restrict all surface mining because it destroyed the natural beauty of America. It wasn't that he didn't believe you shouldn't mine, but he wanted the like tunnel mines where you go down and do the exploration underground, not just like ripping up entire mountains, which of course is going to piss off the international syndicate again. Separate from his reorganization, he specifically, because of our nuclear posture, had a very specific plan for reorganizing the Department of Energy as it related around our nuclear facilities. And he wanted, there was 50 different entities that dealt with energy, and he reorganized them all under the Department of Energy. And James Schlesinger becomes the first Secretary of Energy under Carter. Okay, so we already talked about the Panama Treaty. He also cut off funding for the B-1 bomber, another thing to piss off the syndicate, and visited very early in his presidency. He visited Poland, Tehran, Iran, India, Saudi, Pakistan, France, and Belgium. So that's kind of an overview of Jimmy Carter and his 4 years as president. We can get a little bit more involved in the Panama Canal specifically, but basically I've shared that through the videos in large part. So I'm going to just open it up for any comments that anybody wants to make.
And no, it is subjective as to whether or not, like you had pointed out in one of the videos that you did ahead of time, as to whether or not, he did not receive a special envelope at George Bush Sr.'s funeral, and he did a lot of things that seemed to be intended to break the international syndicate into pieces.
He definitely took action in that venue. That is absolutely true.
But as far as, never let a good funeral go to waste.
Oh, absolutely.
The syndicate's going to use that to disrupt as much as they can.
Absolutely.
I also find it very interesting, the timing of it, like when they're having him, when they're doing the state funeral, the date, and yes, I feel that they're going to try and disrupt, have that like sway over to disrupt the inauguration. But with also what's going on with the dollar and stuff like that, it's just very interesting timing, how all of these things are starting to play together. And I also looked at Carter's presidency, like from the outside, if you want to say, kind of like what's going on now in some respects, because during his presidency, there was the Iranian hostage situation that was going on throughout the entire presidency, which is kind of representation of what's going on here in the United States, in my personal opinion, that we're kind of like, we're all kind of held hostage with the corrupt Biden regime, if you want to say, because it's the cabal. I mean, I totally understand that. And then it's just kind of crazy, like the parallels, if you want to say, but it's just interesting also with the pause too.
So the Iranian hostage crisis started in November 79. So he'd actually been in the presidency for about 2.5 years, but he had done several things prior to the Iran hostage crisis beginning that had pissed everybody off. So that would have given them plenty of time to be able to plan that if that was in fact went down that way. But I did look up when BCCI bought the Georgia Bank, and they bought it in the end of 1977, which was when he fired all of the CIA guys. So oh, you just can't make this shit up.
Wasn't he overseeing also a bunch of elections all over the world that were like
it's kind of like he was the tool for the deep state, but then yet he was trying to expose the deep state in some respects, because he was on David Letterman and he talked about the 150 young women for, you know, trafficking and stuff. So, I mean, there were things that he did and said, but then there are things where, so it just seems like he was kind of like a little bit of a rebel, but completely controlled.
So yeah, so he started the election thing. The first mentioned involvement in foreign elections was 1989, about 10 years after he left office. And yes, he was very outspoken about human trafficking. So again, I want everybody to understand, I am not saying Carter's a good guy. I am also not saying he's the same bad guy that everybody thinks he is. I want everybody to go back with our gladio glasses on and relook at history for what it really is, not what we were told it was. And obviously, Carter, in just some of the things that he did, was a threat to some elements of the international syndicate. Does that mean that he's a good guy? No, it doesn't. That just means that he was a threat and he had pieces of it that he disagreed with. And obviously, one of the pieces he disagreed with was covert operations. He vehemently disagreed that we ought to be going around and doing regime change. That doesn't mean he was a good guy. There were other things that he did that weren't good. But you also can't not recognize the things that he did that were good, such as the Reorganization Act and trying to make government more efficient. That's a good thing. To try to reduce nuclear weapons, that's a good thing. And we have been co-opted and had a psychological operation ran on us to make anything that is said about Carter a negative, when that's absolutely flies in the face of reality. And that's the same thing that I've told you to watch out for. If you have a visceral reaction to something, it's because you've been programmed to have that reaction. Same thing with the anti-war movement, how we've been viscerally programmed to associate that with history, rock and roll music, and debauchery, when that's not what it was at all in reality. So we've definitely been psyopsed, and through one situation at a time, we're going to go back and we're going to look at history for what it really was in an unemotional, honest, gladio glass and wearing assessment of where we've actually been. Avelle?
Hi, Colonel. Thank
Hi.
you for the mic. Interesting conversations here, as always. I have something to say that's totally different than what you're saying about Carter, and it has to do with a book that I have. I was given a book, not given, but given it to hold on to for a while and read, that's well over 100 years old. It's a Masonic book. And it's a Masonic book from Georgia. The Grand Lodge of Georgia was organized on December 16th, 1786, making it one of the oldest Grand Lodges in the United States. So very early on, the law, the government of the U.S. and the Masonic Lodge in Georgia were very much hand in hand. When I look at that book and I look at the names, we're talking about the Department of the Georgia Secretary of State, and everybody is listed in that book. And it's very interesting. And that coupled with the Georgia Guidestones and Jekyll Island, Georgia, I just wonder, and I have mixed feelings about the Masons. I don't personally think they're all bad or all good, but I do think they've been infiltrated. And in the Q drops, we have the Masons in there. I don't know what to make of any of this.
What's the name of the book, Avelle?
Well, the cover is ripped off of it. It is. Let me see if I can tell you. It's so old, it crumbles when I try to touch it. The opening part of it is an act incorporating the Grand Lodge of the state of Georgia. There is no actual cover that's missing in the book.
So you don't know the name of the book?
No, it's
Okay.
I was given several books, and they were from a Mason in Georgia, and it's like a basic manual that you would be getting if you were Mason. It has the opening and closing ceremonies in it and all kinds of things in it. It's very interesting, though. I haven't read the whole thing. I need to take it to somebody who can properly salvage it for me. But what I thought, maybe for this conversation at least, there's so much that goes on with Georgia in our elections and lots of talk about Georgia. And I just thought it was interesting that Georgia in particular goes back so far with the mingling of the Masons and our legislative system. So I don't know what you think about, or anybody does, but I don't know. Thought it was interesting.
Thanks.
I'll just land it there.
Yep, thanks. Ron, go ahead.
When you look back at Carter, he was, I forget, was Carter trilateral? I don't think Carter was trilateral, but he had Zbigniew Brzezinski on his as his national security advisor, who was trilateral. Warhamster and I have had multiple discussions about this. So we tend to believe that there were two factions within the United States that were kind of vying for control. One using kind of like the, I guess you'd say, the Council on Foreign Relations, and then when the Rockefellers kind of put out the Trilateral Commission in like 1971 or something. I think that's the year. And is it possible that with Brzezinski there, that there was that was kind of like the first iteration of the Rockefeller influence in the government, using Carter? Because I mean, he did put in the, I mean, not that Rockefeller hasn't had influence in the government in the past, but at least from the standpoint of the using the Trilateral Commission with Zbigniew Brzezinski. So, because I with the Grand Chessboard and what Brzezinski did in the Middle East, essentially laying the foundation for the all the wars that we've been fighting for the last 20 years. So, or actually 30 years if you count the Gulf War. And and he laid the trap for the Russians to come into Afghanistan during Carter's administration. So there's a lot there, and I'm just curious. I agree with you that I need to go back and reanalyze quite a bit of stuff about the Carter administration that I didn't really think about. And I just got my copy of the book that you're reading yesterday, so I'm excited to be able to follow along. And one last comment that I'd like to say is I think is it Avell? You were talking about Georgia. They never put together the Georgia Guidestones, the Jekyll Islands, and some of those things. That's interesting to me. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting. And ironically, I was born in Georgia. So anyway.
Carter was a trilateral member.
Okay.
And yes, it is true that Brzezinski was useful in setting up the CIA to entice the Soviet Union into Afghanistan during the Carter administration, to give them their quote unquote Vietnam. And so, Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, Colonel. I just wanted to kind of echo what you were saying. When I first saw that Carter was dead, I was like, okay, they killed him. And I want to talk, because I'm a medical person, I want to just inform people a little bit about how that can happen to the elderly. They get a no resuscitate order. And if you're incapacitated, you have like a health person that's like legally above your health decisions, and then they will induce death through morphine. That's what they do.
Okay, but we don't know they did that.
No, I'm saying this can happen. That's
right.
I can say that we know that
they
did that. I'm saying this is medically what they do.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the other thing is sometimes I get really frustrated. I'm like, I have this like huge bucket of knowledge about what's happening. And I'm like, but what? I'm one tiny little speck of dust. What the hell am I supposed to do? But I just try to remember, sometimes it's very hard, but I try to remember that in quantum mechanics, they found that observing changes the outcome of the experiment. So just us observing this changes the outcome.
Which is why I adamantly believe that we have to push back when it's necessary to do so. Trump Frog, did you have something? I know you had your hand up, but now it's down.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that Carter was a good guy. His mistakes were when he took the Shah of Iran and he took him to San Diego for his cancer treatment. Upset a lot of people. And also the Brzezinski thing was a really bad look and connection. So he's a conflicted, in my opinion, a conflicted president, because I think he had a good heart, like what Stellar brought up about the kids and trafficking and how that was a big deal. I think that's really important that gets left into the narrative. But you have to understand, there's a bunch of people that are on X that promote a bunch of absolute garbage, and they're very emotional when they're attacking this guy. It's like Trump, was the classy guy and said what he needed to say. And yeah, it was, the United States was a mess because Jimmy Carter was kind of just a good guy socialist, but don't think those normally go together.
A lot of houses got repossessed during his era.
Yeah,
he was a tool, in my opinion. I think he was captured.
He destroyed our economy, but the fact he would go out there and talk about child trafficking like he did, I think, is a redeeming quality.
But I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that he destroyed our economy. I think
with just gas lines.
No, but I think
things, the economy.
But I think when he deregulated gas, that pissed off the international syndicate, and they got together with Saudi Arabia, and all of that rationing of gas and all that other stuff was all, to me, a made-up crisis to make Jimmy Carter look bad. And you can do a whole big psycho, economic analysis of the whole thing, but you're not going to convince me that they were not pissed off and got their buddies over in the Middle East to make a big stink. Because I think they were working with Iran at the same time. And that all got proven later on after all of the disclosure with what we were doing through Israel in Iran. And so they can make all of those people marshal together to do whatever they want. They all got colluded in 1972 to create the BCCI Bank. So you cannot forget that the entire time Carter was president, the BCCI Bank is going around the world with tens of billions of dollars and buying weapons, trafficking people, and trafficking opium, with Nugent Hand Bank down in Australia. All of this shit's going on around Carter's presidency. And all they had to do was pick up the phone to get the CIA to do their bullshit in Afghanistan, and the Soviets roll in. All they had to do was pick up their phone to do the shit in Iran, and instantly they have a revolution. And all of that made Carter look incompetent, and that may have been the actual reason they did it. So, a lot of shit going on all along. Go ahead.
Yeah, Colonel, I just think that it's important in evaluating, all of these administrations, which is basically like the kind of educational proof pellet or form, as it were, that we, feed kids in terms of education, like these 4-year administrations, right? Almost like they're a separate product. And as you've shown in all of your shows, it's so much more a kind of river running through it, as it were. Use that metaphor that I barely understand. Or just basically what I mean is like continuity And that's why I think it's so important to always keep in mind, like, how late is this after the CIA coup d'etat of late 1963? In other words, that's really useful in thinking about Watergate, right? Because we now know what we call, quote, Watergate, unquote, is really starting in 1968, if not earlier, right? With the October surprise and whatnot with Richard Milhouse Nixon, and his ongoing relationship, since way back with the East Coast money sources of the Republican Party and their very direct CIA connections. And so the thing in terms of bringing it back to Jimmy Carter, it's like, I think it's good to realize, hey, this is, his presidency started 14 years after a CIA domestic coup, and that might look different from 5 years after a CIA domestic coup, as with Nixon, or, and again, you got to do, in my opinion, you got to look at that with all the presidents, that it helps us see, longer term trends, and also what that does, how these unelected bureaucracies limit, the sovereignty of elected officials, right? I mean, of any president, 40 years, 60 years after a coup is going to be very different from 5 years after a coup, in my opinion. And just another part of that is, I think, one of the things that's really kind of lost in all of this, that gets so little media attention, especially among popular historians of the Democratic Party, is that the 1968 RFK campaign and the 1972 George McGovern campaigns, those are kind of like combining what I call the Altoona curve of the Democratic Party. In other words, this is a huge change that very, very little, discussion ever happens about. It's never brought up in the media. And I think it's a really gigantic change. For example, McGovern was thinking of taking RFK's place in late 1968 after the assassination. And also, the same bigwigs that in the DNC, the same, machine politicians that are connected to the CIA, that helped the CIA assassinate and cover up RFK, are later the same folks who have just completely abandoned George McGovern. And again, that election was tied until George Wallace was shot. So just one, I've been blathering on, but one, if I could recommend an amazing, truly amazing book that actually covers the 68 to 72 period as good as I've ever seen it covered, because you so rarely see these structural shenanigans inside the Democratic Party being discussed. It's actually a book that's on the Clintons, God help us. The book, it came out in 1995 by one of my very favorite political writers. His name is Roger Morris. That's not the same as the other Morris. That's not Dick Morris, but it's Roger Morris. And he wrote a book called Partners in Power about the Clintons. But half the book is about looking at this period, like between 68 and 72, of the Democratic Party and all of the truly anti-populist measures that were taken by elites in the Democratic Party. And he's about the best political writer I've ever read. You can't put his books down. It's like almost like poetry. He's such an amazing writer. He was former in the NSC under Johnson and Nixon, left the NSC in 1970 under about Cambodia. But anyway, it's truly amazing on the 68-72 period, without which I think we cannot see Jimmy Carter, because he's almost like let's all start over again after Watergate. There's this aspect of, the whole, let's get out of DC and go to a small town, and that can be used to obfuscate a lot of shit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, got it. All right. Patriot Sarah, go ahead.
Hi. So I have a fun fact. I didn't know whether to bring it up or whatever, but I live down in Brazil, and and President Carter came by our school back in '78, and it seems to me there were mixed feelings with the teachers and the students back then. I just thought I'd share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Because we weren't too far away from, about 10 years prior to that, overthrowing their government down there. So I'm sure that was interesting. Bridget, go ahead.
And one of the things I just wanted to point out when we look at this with our gladio glasses on, we see how they orchestrated events during the Trump presidency to make his presidency less effective and to tarnish his history, literally, with the COVID and the COVID vaccine and the COVID response and all that. They attempted a lot of things, and in my opinion, it seems from the perspective, if you step back, that may have been some of what was going on during the time he was president.
Yeah, definitely could have. I did want to add just a little bit of flavor to the conversation. If you go back to let's see, the 1976 election that Carter barely won, you have 12 people, technically 13, including him, in the primary. And the Jerry Brown, George Wallace, Mo Udall, Ellen McCormick, Frank Church, Henry Jackson, Lloyd Benson, Milton Schaap, Fred Harris, Sargent Schreiber, Birch Bay, and Terry Sanford. So some big hitter names, and you end up with Jimmy Carter, which I find interesting. But also, I did not know, or I didn't remember if I did know, that Ronald Reagan ran against Ford in the primary. And then obviously Ford ran against Carter and lost. And I'm kind of interested to know, because Ford ran with Bob Dole as his running mate, as opposed to Nelson Rockefeller, who had been his vice president. I'm sure there's a story there too. Avel?
Hi, Colonel. Just something I forgot. We had talked about this in a previous space. With the Iran hostage situation, we had the advent of the tie the yellow ribbon around the old oak tree, which is a type of inculcation to us as Americans and anybody else that was participating in that. So I do tend to feel, I think kind of like you did, Froggy, is maybe he was used, and maybe he wasn't like essentially as a human being all bad, but he was used, and his presidency brought in this tie a yellow ribbon, this mass inculcation into our society, and it brought in the Muslim Brotherhood into power. It does appear. Actually, from my research, it seems that the coup began long before 1979, maybe back in the 1940s, but at least the one that we see and the hostage was 1979. So there's that whole other element that during his presidency, you have this mass inculcation happening to our entire society. And just thinking about that. That's all.
Okay. So the Muslim Brotherhood was around a whole lot sooner than 1979, just so everybody understands that. That was born and bred of the British involvement in Egypt in the late 1920s. Ron, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I think it's fair to say that in 1976, at that time in our history, it was a whole lot easier to manipulate elections because you didn't have the presence of the internet and information moved a lot slower. So I think it's fair to assume that perhaps Carter was was installed more than elected. And I found an interesting article, and I actually put it in the Purple Pill. And I just want to read just a really brief paragraph. So the very simple and short backstory goes like this. The USA shadow government wanted a POTUS in 1977 who would be very easy to manipulate and control. For a variety of reasons, the most important having to do with the Middle East geopolitical chessboard at the time. They wanted a real born-again Christian whose strong sympathies lay with the Christian communities throughout the Middle East that existed among the vast Muslim majorities. That person was Jimmy Carter. And then it goes down and it says, in point of fact, his entire foreign policy team was deliberately assembled to ensure that a specific outcome would be achieved. And if you look at it, it was Stanfield, Turner, Brzezinski, Vance, Harold Brown, Walter Mondale, all those people. So in reference to the thing that he was a good man, he very well may have been a good man. And every single president, whether I agree with them or disagree with them politically, there's always going to be something that they did that I thought was good. Or, but at the end of the day, I think Carter was more of kind of a dupe. From what I understand, he was also really depressed. He suffered from depression lifelong. So I think at that moment in time, they needed somebody that the powers that be behind the scenes needed somebody that they could control, and Carter was the weakest individual that could do it. And you got to realize that they were coming off of the Watergate scandal, which had a huge stain on the presidency in the mindset of the country. So having a good, tender man who was a Christian come in there who appeared to be like super awesome and moral, I think that was something that kind of played on the heartstrings of Americans, and I'll leave it at that.
So you're talking about calming the herd?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, Stellar, go ahead.
Well, also you have, in my opinion, also go farther. Back in the 70s, I think when Ford and Nixon were in office and stuff like that, there was something that, hold on, I just checked it out. Okay, in 1970, Earl Butz, the Secretary of Agriculture under Nixon and Ford administrations, popularized the slogan, "Get big or get out." Well, then in the 70s, you had the American Agriculture Movement, the AAM, which were the family farmers that ended up suing the government. And then in the 80s, there was the Farm Aid concert and stuff like that, which was also to raise money for this organization for the legal fees, which ended up going into the Nassara thing that was supposed to be announced on September 11th. So there was a lot of other things that were going behind the scenes that we didn't see.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely very true. Yeah, the Schlesinger thing is very interesting to me too. I don't know if you guys know anything about him that he put as the first Department of Energy, because Schlesinger had a nuclear background, much like Jimmy Carter did. Had worked with different nuclear technologies, and he spent some time under Nixon at the Atomic Nuclear Energy Commission, and he spent a very short period of time as the CIA director because they got rid of William Colby. So obviously has some intel stink on him. He moves over in between of 73 and 75 as the SecDef after having left the CIA, which I find very interesting because he ends up at RAND, which is part of the CIA too. So that's what I'm saying. I think that the crew around, and this goes to Ron's point, the crew that was situated around Carter were actually running the show. You have all of these people that have all of this international syndicate stink on them, for lack of a better phrase. And Carter is a figurehead that is very appealing from a calming of the world or of the waters based on the turbulence that had just gone on. So almost like, let's put him in there. Everybody will think everybody's fat, dumb, and happy, and then we can continue pedaling like hell underwater, and nobody's going to see us. So,
can I ask you a real quick question on that? Do you think Mondale was a stronger politician than Carter, and that's why he was put in as vice president?
Well, if you go to
the only reason I ask is because I for the longest time, I've often thought that Bush was the first vice president that really had like a bigger role than almost the president, in the Reagan administration, or did things clandestinely. But I'm now beginning to question whether or not Mondale also had a similar style of role.
There's the vice president during the Carter administration. This part I was able to figure out. They did not change a lot of the National Security Council structure. So Mondale would have been on all of those committees that approved all of the covert action. And there was a lot going on. He also served on the church committee, which Mondale did, which, yeah. So he knew all of the background on all of the stuff that was going on. And so there's no evidence, I'll say that. There's no evidence of him being as intimately involved as either Nixon was, under Eisenhower, or Bush under Reagan, or even Nelson Rockefeller under Ford was crazy. And nobody knows all of the crap that he did as vice president. He had this entire commission in which volumes were written about, and his commission that he headed, which literally has volumes of books, like 5 of them. I've got 3 of the 5. And they were cited for like the next 20 years on how to upheaval our entire country, based on supposedly data that Nelson Rockefeller found during this, once in a lifetime, solve all of the ails of a country. His background is just crazy, in all of the coups in South America, in Latin America overall. So there's definitely everybody but him, but I've never looked at him. So I guess I'll add him to my to-do list.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're not. Anyway, anybody else?
Yeah, I have. I'm kind of new here, but I was a physician in training at the Penn State University Hershey Medical Center in March of 1979. When we had the massive uncontrolled release of radioactive material from radioactive reactor number 2 at 3 Mile Island. And they flew in Jimmy Carter to stand in front of it so he could show us how safe it was. Even though they did have a partial meltdown and they could have had a disaster, but it was one of those kind of things where they used him to say safe and effective. But at the time, there was also kind of a debate about nuclear power, and there was a bumper sticker that somebody had that said more people have died in the backseat of Senator Kennedy's car than in any nuclear accident.
Okay.
So it was an interesting time, and you wonder if there was some kind of sabotage involved in that TMI thing, because it looked to me as from my previous military history that it would be easy for a small squad of highly skilled military people to go in and upset that sucker.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I read an article about 2 months ago that what suggested the same thing. Now, they don't have any, fingerprints, but they did basically a look around the world at Chernobyl and Japan and 3 Mile Island. And there was some very interesting similarities that definitely rise to the occasion to ask a whole bunch more questions. So
I would have not thought of that until I saw your Gladio work, which is fascinating and awesome. And
thank you.
Greatest respect for the work you've done on that. It's amazing.
Thank you. And it does make you look at things different, which is why I felt it's so critical to tell everybody about it. Since you're new here, I will tell you, I basically gave up my normal life because I felt so compelled about what it was and how it was done and the applicable repercussions on everything. Because once you realize that these people have no qualms in killing millions of people at a time, it really does give you pause to look at things in a completely different light. So that's the reason why every national event like the death of Jimmy Carter gives us the opportunity with our Gladio glasses on to go back and dig up some of this information and actually and I do believe President Trump does highlight things like the Panama Canal with the expectancy that we go and dig up what the real truth is. And sometimes the things that he says isn't accurate. And I do believe he wants us to push back on that in order to kind of give us our street threads that we've learned something over the last 8 years, that when your government officials say something, it's not always going to be 100% correct. And it is incumbent upon the citizenries to hold them accountable to it. So, Stellar, go ahead.
Well, you guys know that my dad used to work he was a controller, engineer, whatever, at the Nevada test site. And I know that just before Jimmy Carter came in and during his whole presidency, my dad worked a lot. When he didn't come home, there was always usually an early morning shot. That's what they used to call the underground tests. If there were, the cars from the test site at my house, all of our friends we all knew what was going on, and I guess the confirmations of the things. Now, by the time Reagan went in, I think halfway through his presidency, they started slowing down, and then my dad got really pissed off because he didn't have as much overtime.
All right. Anybody else? I don't see any more hands. Carl?
Hey, Colonel. Yeah, so going back to the Poppy Bush funeral, if you remember the look on Carter's face, he was almost like shocked, like he wasn't getting an envelope. And that was telling to me. I'm curious what you thought about that.
I agree with you. It is since we don't know what was in the envelopes, it's kind of hard to have an opinion as to his exclusion. But that is really what gave me my initial kind of curiousness to go back and look at Carter once I had Gladio glasses, in order to put in perspective what his presidency was all about. And with Gladio glasses, when you go back and you look at Carter, you see somebody completely different. And I will share with you a funny story. I think I've told it once when I first got back. I went down to the Badlands Media movie reveal down in their premiere down in South Florida around the Naples area, and got to meet the whole crew. And there was a lady that sat at my table that's a news reporter. She had worked for ABC and all kinds of different places. She works for a local affiliate down in the Naples area. And nice conservative person, and we were talking about her struggles working in a liberal news station as a conservative. And so I was telling her she had never heard about Gladio or anything. And since it was a big part of the movie, the whole middle part of the Badlands movie was Gladio. And so I was explaining to her briefly what it is. And she's like, oh, so kind of, you know a lot about this. And I said, well, yeah, I know a little bit about it. And so she says, well, let me ask you something. She says, because this has always bugged me. My history professor told me in college that one day that we were all going to realize Jimmy Carter wasn't who everybody said he was. And I looked at her and I just kind of laughed and I said, well, I have to be honest with you. He isn't who I thought he was. And I kind of looked at her, and that was the first time I'd ever said it. They've lied about everything else. What makes you think they didn't lie about Jimmy Carter? And she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, damn, I didn't even think about that." And I said, "Well, think about it if we weren't here and the left was writing the history 10 years from now. President Trump would be Hitler. All of our children would grow up believing that President Trump was Hitler, like literally Hitler, not like figuratively, literally like Hitler." And I said, what they can do in a 4-year span of time to completely change the context of how you view somebody. And I said, and while Trump was president, they completely had control of the narrative and made the entire country believe he was Hitler. What makes you think they didn't do that with Jimmy Carter? And when you start looking at things, they spent 8 fucking years telling us President Reagan was the best thing since sliced bread, and the last 30 years trying to make us believe it and shoving it down our throat. And we now know unequivocally that is not true. So again, when you take a minute, use objective gladio glasses and look at things the way they actually are, not the way you're being told to believe them through a box hanging on the wall now, instead of sitting on your living room floor, it is quite interesting to look back at historical records. And I'm talking about real records. I'm talking about, again, not everything in congressional testimony is 100% true. You can correspond that with news articles and all that other stuff. So you can kind of triangulate truth by looking at a whole bunch of different array to include books that were written not just in close proximity to the time that it happened, but in 20 years, 25 years when things have been declassified about particular situations. And you can get a much better view of what's going on. Once you have that view, you can recognize patterns that continually to this day repeat themselves. Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, normally I would push back on the whole, Trump is playing 3D chess with his words and stuff. But he's a Gemini, and whether people want to argue about astrology, whatever. But Geminis have 2 personalities, but they are master communicators. If you know a Gemini, you will never meet a more proficient communicator ever. So, I have to think twice.
Okay. Tim, go ahead.
Hey, the Badlands Media guys, that's Patel Patriot, right?
Yes.
What do your gladio glasses tell you about his Substacks?
I don't read a Substack. What specifically?
About all the executive orders and all the things Trump did between.
I think he's talking about devolution.
Devolution, correct.
Okay, so there's two aspects to devolution. Everything that John Harold has written about executive orders, all of his executive orders, he just basically reproduces executive orders. So you cannot argue whether or not they're good or bad. They just are. And as far as continuity of government, which devolution is one aspect of 4 or 5 different approved in DOD regulation aspects of continuity of government. So is continuity of government a thing? Yes, it is. Is devolution one of the options under continuity of government? Yes, it is. It is written in DOD directives. It's there for everybody to look at. You can read about what justifies you implementing it. There are certain criteria that has to be met. So is devolution a thing? Yes, it is. But it is one of many things that encompasses continuity of government. And from that point on, everything that he says is speculative. So he has used an extensive amount of research into the executive orders, the sequence in which they were written, and review of the DoD directives and instructions that correspond with those particular executive orders. Now, let me just tell you that for 4 years at the Pentagon, that was my job, and I hated it. There is nothing worse than getting a new change in law and having to be sitting on a joint working group and rewriting DoD directives and instructions and then turn around and do it for the Air Force. That is some of the most monotonous, boring bullshit. And so I read his letters as he was kind of formulating his theories, and I was thoroughly impressed that a civilian would even care to look at any of that crap because it's boring as hell. Now, him having speculated, and he is very clear to say that it is 100% speculation as to what all of that means. And he is drawing a conclusion based on that speculation that one or more pieces of the continuity of government may have been put into play, i.e., devolution. That is all speculative because it is highly compartmentalized, classified, if anything like that was to ever happen. Because those of us who sat on working groups to draft the Air Force's piece of a continuity of government scenario, which many of us that worked in readiness did, you understand that you are looking at one small piece of a puzzle and you're not even allowed to look at the rest of them. You are given a scenario. You are responsible for writing the instructions within the Air Force. If this particular scenario happens, you don't get to see all of the scenarios. You get to see one. Your one piece is rolled up into a much bigger piece, and you're never allowed to see the bigger piece because it's strictly compartmentalized. So you wouldn't even find anyone below the grade of maybe a 4 or 3-star general that had an entire picture of what that inclusive plan looked like, even within the Air Force, let alone the DoD directive. So, or the DoD staff. So you're talking about, again, very highly classified information that may or may not be in play. He is giving you a scenario where he believes it is, and it's 100% speculation. And he says that, which is, good on him for doing that, because he is being very honest, and I admire all of the work that he has done. He did a shitload of work on that. And again, it is very, very boring to go through and do what he did. I give him my hats off to him for doing it. And there is, he makes a very good case for that being the case, but it is 100% speculation. Does that help?
Yeah, he was, I don't know, I found the Substacks early, like right after 2020, and man, I was the I don't know the number, but the executive order where if a foreign entity was involved in U.S. election fraud, that they could seize assets and all. That really got me going. I was kind of hoping they would execute on it, and still holding out for that.
Well, again, if it was executed, you and I would know. It could be, and it could be why certain assets has been frozen. We don't know, and we're not going to know until someone wants to declassify it or share it with us. So we have to go ahead every day as if that's not happening, and do what we can in order to save our country. And that's basically, what we're here doing.
Well, God bless you for doing it.
Thank you. Thanks. Anybody else? I don't see any hands. So, Kelly, how are you? I see you here.
I'm here. Yes, ma'am. I'm doing well. Just popping in to catch up and listen in on what you got going on.
Awesome. Glad to see you here. All right, guys.
Great space today, Colonel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
As always.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and Colonel, when are you doing the one on Panama, or did I miss it?
Well, we've done one on Panama per se, but I think now is a good time. Maybe we will take tomorrow since we're going to be off on Wednesday. Maybe we'll take the 4 o'clock tomorrow time and do a run through of Panama, just like from start to finish. And because
you could also do a teaser tonight at the conference.
Oh, no, that's a better idea, Stellar. That's a great idea. Why don't we? Yes, we will do that tonight at 8 o'clock, 8:15-ish, the pond. We will do a 100% Panama start to finish. And yeah, that's an excellent idea, Stellar. Thank you for bringing that up.
Can I make a weird request alongside that, Colonel? Please
Sure.
feel free, obviously, to say no. But with everything that's going on with the Panama Canal and, people talking about the Chinese influence there and the Panamanian government even acknowledging that. So with Panama and so maybe Panama, China, and Greenland and that whole issue with Trump, maybe we could do Panama and Greenland.
So Greenland, I'm doing on Thursday with Badlands Media with the SITREP guys, CanCon and Alpha. So I don't really want to get out ahead of that. I promised them. We did Panama on SITREP last Thursday on with CanCon and Alpha, but going over that because I've already got all the notes. Tonight we'll do Panama, and then Thursday night I will be at 9 o'clock on SITREP again, and we're going to do Greenland. And so maybe we can kind of revisit that next Monday on the pond as well. But yeah, I don't want to get out ahead of them since I've already promised them I'd bring the information to them. So
that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Colonel.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll try to touch on the Chinese piece of Panama because that's a very interesting piece of the puzzle. So yeah, and I didn't really go into that. Go ahead, Bridget. Bridget, we can't hear you if you're talking. You want to, I'll take you down and bring you back up. They love picking on Bridget.
Picking on her. Elon and all of you people out there that are out in the ether, leave Miss Bridget alone.
Okay, so let me just tell you guys something that will give you guys, you guys will appreciate it more than anybody else. So, every time I come into my own space, I get kicked off every single time, at least once. So I'm talking to Paul Williams on the phone, and we're like 10 minutes into the conversation and the line goes dead. And so he calls me back and he's like, "Did you hang up on me?" And I'm like, "No." "Did you hang up on me?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "Damn it, they're doing my phone lines now too." And I explained to him how every single time that I'm on X, they kick me out of my own space. So I told him, I said, "This is an Operation Gladiator." And he goes, "Oh, trust me, honey, this is not my first rodeo." He says, "I've had this happen to me more than once." He said, "I was on like an ABC interview and the entire link went down. They couldn't even reconnect him." So our podcast ought to be really interesting. Can you hear me now, Bridget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just wanted to say, in case anybody came in late, make sure you mark your calendar for January 9th, 4 p.m. Going to do the space with Colonel Connor Watkins and Paul Williams, the author of the book Operation Gladio, that kind of kicked all of this off. And it's going to be pretty impressive, pretty amazing, I think.
I'm so excited. So anyway, I rarely get excited about any of this crap. That part I'm very excited about. So anyway, all right, guys, thanks for being here. I'm going to jump off here and grab some dinner. Appreciate everybody being here. tonight at 8 or 8:15, Stellar?
Probably 8:15, so that way. Sorry, 8:15, so that way he has time to do
Okay.
it in case he's like swamped with work because it's
Yeah, it'll be 8:15.
Okay, 8:15, the pond. We're going to talk about Panama. Awesome.
And we know that Kelly's going to be there too because she's the one who's going to. We're going to be listening about Panama and all the other goodies. Those are
Who is?
Quelly will be there too
Okay.
because she's usually busy, so she's going to mark her calendar.
All right.
She's going to help co-host.
Girl, I will if you don't call me Quelly. I will be there if you call me Kelly.
Can I just call you Kelly, please? Because everybody keeps correcting me.
Oh, by the way, thank you, because I used to get harassed for calling my homie Kelly. They're like, no, it's Quelly. It's like, you know what? I'm going to call her whatever she'll allow me to call her, and you're not going to worry about it. How about that? How do you like that?
Act like you're in charge, Trump Frog.
Oh, I am in charge.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, Colonel's Corner after dark tonight. Let's roll.
Colonel's Corner after dark. Oh, shit. I like that.
I knew you would.
Riding dirty.
If you see how salty she's been on X, it's great. I just enjoy it. If you haven't caught her videos, Kelly, she's been on fire. It's amazing.
Yeah, today I got a little out of control.
Yeah, well, all the operators are exposing themselves, and it's a beautiful thing.
They definitely are. That's absolutely true.
Like that Jack piece of shit. Did you see the back channel messaging of him protesting Trump in 2020?
Who's that?
To think of Jack piece of shit, Pasovic.
No, I did not.
God, you got to follow my page sometimes because we literally talked about it the day before, and somebody must have been listening because they posted his interaction on a back channel chat board where they were protesting and they were trying to figure out what they should say, and his message was rape Melania.
What?
Are you what?
Yes, and just like that fraud, that dude Larry Loomer, they've never been on our side. They're in it for money.
Laura Loomer, you mean?
Yeah, Larry Loomer.
Larry Loomer. Frog.
Hey, look into her past. It's Larry Loomer. I'm telling you.
That's probably why you don't show up on my page. Why don't your stuff? I follow you. Why don't your stuff show up on my page?
I'm probably shadow banned because of
because you calling somebody Larry Loomer. You're a mess.
Oh yeah. She's creating all this division. Oh, crush Elon and Vivek and all of this. Well, guess what? You don't support Trump because if he does, sit your ugly ass down and wait for shit to happen, acting like she knows better than he does. What a piece of crap.
Well, I'm going to go find that thing about Jack Posobiec. That explains why he won't talk about Operation Gladio. And when he did, like 5 seconds after we were on that first Monday night, he did it in a very divisive way. So that's very, very interesting.
He was anti-Q, now he's Q. His backstory, he's garbage. He's just a troll.
Oh, look at you.
Controlled opposition.
It's called microchip.
I love this.
Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, exactly, microchip. He was there to stop Anons from actually digging.
Trump Frog. Karen Mossad Loomer. Oh
my God. Look at my page. Hey, it's asking questions is one thing, right? If you have a question about what's going on, when you attack somebody mercilessly and then say, "Oh, I'm just asking questions," you sound like that one space that happens around 11 o'clock. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to cause more problems, but you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Tissue. I know that one. That's tissue.
Yep.
See, I'm understanding these code words now. See, I'm getting pretty good.
These give, send, go people. Yeah, I'm in it for the truth. Really? Then why are you asking people to donate money? I don't. If you do get Substacks and write like Colonel and other people that actually put out content that people can consume instead of speaking on a space, no one should be paid to speak on a space. I think I'm going to do a space on that. All these subscriber only after spaces. It should be called Grifters After Dark. That's a bunch of shit. Spaces are free. I'm not here to make friends. I'm just here to tell the truth and have fun. not here to have people send me money.
Wow.
Tonight is gonna be lit.
It is. It's time for me to come out. I didn't jump in on the whole debate about Vivek, who's now all of a sudden a bad guy and Elon has never been a Trump guy. Half these people that are complaining weren't even MAGA in 16 or 20. But you make money being MAGA. So now they're all MAGA and they're arbitrators of truth. I don't care if you became MAGA the day of the election. You're MAGA now. That's all that matters. And where we go on, we go all.
And let me just say that, again, my whole take on the efficiency, whatever, H-1B, we had a really good space yesterday with Ash in America about what the whole story really is. And again, I think it's much like what just happened with Jimmy Carter in the Panama Canal. There's something that's thrown out. Our job is to go do the research and present facts so that you can inform people. The information that is pointed out, the conversations where they lead, and when you see somebody talking very emotionally about anything, know 100% something's going on. Take a step back, look around, know that that is your signal that you need to go research and come back to the fight with facts. And that's basically what we did yesterday at 5:30. We had all of the facts of the H-1B visa. This is not an immigration conversation. It's a labor conversation. This is about people in America working. It is not about immigration. They took a labor situation that was a complete lie, and they came up with an immigration solution to their lie. So let's go back and look at who lied to us. And of course, it's the exact same people that always lied to us, the international syndicate that didn't want to pay real wages to real software engineers in America. And they couldn't farm those jobs out because a lot of them are in critical infrastructure to include the Department of Defense. So they had to bring people in. The only way you bring people in that you can pay cheaper wages is through an immigration program. So this was all about labor and the fucking labor unions not doing their fucking job to represent Americans in this country. And as a result, you come up with a fake solution to a problem that deals with the international syndicate and them wanting to basically have slave laborers, which was the exact same time that they were farming out all of our actual manufacturing jobs. So the fact that this was set up by a former CIA director in 1990, who was on record in Congress saying, we're going to bring in the New World Order, should have been of no surprise to anybody. And if anybody looks at the data, it will tell you that it was a labor problem, not an immigration problem. You don't solve labor problems in the United States with a form of immigration. You should actually solve the labor problem.
Exactly. And then you have the gatekeepers out there trying to direct people and divide the movement at the time where we're not even to the finish line yet.
Yeah. So, but I do think that you have to come up with data and then pushing back, just like, so please don't misunderstand. You do have to, when things aren't right, push back. When Trump nominated to head the DEA, the guy from Hillsborough County that was the sheriff that allowed BLM to block the interstate in Hillsborough County and arrested Preacher Brown at the River Church for staying open and feeding poor people. He arrested him after he let people out of prison or out of jail, the county jail, because of COVID. They arrested a preacher. And that guy is a piece of shit, that sheriff. Everybody around here knows he's a piece of shit because we live right next door in Polk County with Grady Judd. Grady Judd will tell you that guy's a piece of shit. And that guy has no damn business being in charge of the DEA. And I don't know who in the hell told Trump that was a good idea. And so all of us that live in the local area immediately went, oh my God, That cannot happen. So you present facts. And we did. We went and pulled up every statement that asshole ever made about supporting DEI, allowing Antifa into his county. Do you know what happened in Polk County one single time during all of 2020? 3 of those assholes came to one intersection in Polk County, and within 5 minutes, people were trying to run them over. And the county sheriff had to go pick them up to save them because there wasn't nobody in Polk County going to stop for them in the middle of the major intersection in downtown Lakeland. Ain't going to happen in Polk County. And Grady Judd will tell you, if they're not in a crosswalk, run their ass over. Not that guy over there in Hillsborough County. He was shutting down entire roads. He's a jerk. He shouldn't even have a sheriff's star on his chest. And there ain't no way that guy would have upheld the law as the DEA, which is a critical position if you want to shut down the CIA's drug running. So anyway, so those types of things, and you don't do it with all of the emotion I just showed. You do it with facts. And all we did was start cutting and pasting, and we started posting and cutting and pasting and posting. And within like 48, 72 hours, he's withdrawn his nomination. And that's how we do this. If there's something that is a bad idea, and there's going to be bad ideas, guys, but we have to organize, not be emotional, present facts, and move on. So
I couldn't agree more. In fact, sounds like the key thing. You would throw something out there, people would go dig, you throw out something outrageous to expose something. Now, my thought is maybe someone in his inner circle wanted him, and Trump's like, okay, there must be something dirty about him. Here's the easiest way to make sure that we're not forced to take this guy.
Yes. And that's what I'm right. And I'm not saying that's always the case, and I'm not saying that's always not the case. But our job remains the same no matter what the case is. Even if Trump thinks somebody is a good guy and we don't, we are not going to blindly follow anybody. That's not who we are. We're not Democrats. Okay? If you have a piece to say it unemotionally with facts. And let everybody make their decision. All along, go ahead.
Yeah, Carl, when you made your comment about the unions doing nothing, I just had to get back on here because nobody is more cynical about the state of today's DNC backing unions of today, wherein you see these unions backing, Hillary Clinton onto 36-36. I don't know if that's yet a biblical reference, but it's just like really bad. And I think, again, when was it different, or when did it threaten to be different, where you actually had unions say, hey, we are not going to be divided by this strategy of using international factors like immigration to divide unions, to divide especially the skilled versus unskilled workers. And I think it goes back to when the CIO aspect, now so dormant, right? Since the 68-72 period, or really since 63, when the CIO was being activated with Walter Reuther in the new JFK, MLK, Walter Reuther coalition, that formally ended when, the Democrats helped the AFL more right, how should we say, anti-CIO, more heavily skilled, more, this historically privileged. They were privileged in the sense of being higher paid than the less skilled workers, and there was a racial discrepancy there too. It's just historical fact. Okay, so it's like the unions were capable of challenging the CIA and the international syndicate aspect of the Democrats only with that energized CIO bloc, right? Because that's what really puts the heft in their swing. And without that, the unions have just become sheer rot again, sheer, AFL-like elites that, just total DNC insiders. They're not trying to activate any aspect. So they're in no position to challenge any of these dualistic, like immigration framing, which, divides
Well, they're not going to. They're
By unions.
yeah, they're part of the syndicate at this point. They've proven that with their
Yeah.
international institute that they set up in the early '80s under Reagan when he set up the NED.
Right.
Yeah, so they're lock, stock, and barrel in bed with the international syndicate at this point. Yeah, so point well taken. Tim, go ahead.
Criticizing Trump's appointment. Kelly Loeffler is just deep state scum. You know, she never won an election. I'm here in Georgia. She got appointed by her Kemp, who's a complete crook. I could go for a couple hours on another story about him. But she got appointed to the Senate by Kemp, and then her husband's a billionaire. And she's on the TV talking on January 6th that she was supporting a 10-day extension, you know, to look into all the problems with the 2020 election. But then she gets back up on the well after January 6th and, you know, says that since all the peasants had to show their ass today, I'm going to change my mind and vote to confirm the election. But her husband's a billionaire, owns some stock market. But I mean, nobody in Georgia can stand her. And then she got appointed. So that's, you know, I'm a Trump fan. I'm going to back him. I'm going to give him a chance. But of all his appointments, man, that one has just sent me through the roof.
And I think we're all going to experience that based on our personal knowledge of different situations. You just have to, again, with facts, push back in the way that you have available to you. And, you know, if you can convince enough people, make a big enough stink like we did with the Hillsborough County Sheriff, you know, you make it uncomfortable for them. And, you know, he withdrew his name, which was the right thing to do because he was not worthy of that position. But anyway, I thought I'm out. Let's see. Let me get Health Wealth guy up here. Definitely want to hear from him. And then he's going to be our last speaker. We're going to be out after that. So how are you, Health Wealth?
Hey, how you doing, Colonel? How are you, ma'am?
I'm great. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm good to know that. I'm doing fine. I'm blessed. I'm listening to you, and I know you said why I don't come up much because I be just like hearing you, and I'm kind of sad. Hey, Miss Stella, I'm kind of sad that I came to the party late because the information that you provide for my brain is always like the proof in the pudding.
Well, you're definitely going to want to go back and listen to the beginning of this because we're basically setting the record straight on Carter, giving you some facts that people tend to forget along the way.
Well, I definitely got time. I'm on this road.
All right.
You know, I just wanted to come through and give you flowers. Just let you know I appreciate you and love your show so much. And it's just be a good feeling for me. And I just wanted to let you know.
Well, this must be my lucky week. My husband brought me flowers yesterday, too.
Well, he's a good man, smart man.
He is. He absolutely is.
Hey, Miss Stella. Hey, Trump. How you doing down there? I just wanted to say hi to everybody. That's all. I'll yield with that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everybody. We're out of here till tonight at 8:15. We're going to talk Panama. I'll see you guys then. All right, guys, let's go over here and look at what we got. Flowers bring cheer. You're right, Donnie Vision. You know, we don't like give gifts and stuff because every day, as far as I'm concerned, is a gift for him just being around in general. We have so much, you know, a new grandbaby, life's good. And so occasionally he'll walk in with a bouquet of flowers or whatever, and it just brightens your day. But do you know what's even more touching to me? I'm going to try not to tear up telling you guys this, but we'll just keep it between us and the Rumble crowd. We left the X crowd. I bought the house that I live in from my sister. Lots of extenuating circumstances, but I bought it back in the 90s. And my dad's neighborhood where he lived behind our high school had really kind of gotten very seedy, and drug deals and some other stuff. And I was very worried about him. I was still on active duty. I was up in the Pentagon at the time. And I made my sister a deal that if she could convince my dad to move into the house, I would buy the house. And so my dad agreed to move in. He rented his house and he lived here for several years. Well, my stepmom, who was near and dear to me, like a guardian angel to my dad. She loved my dad to death. I loved her. When I was over in Italy, she sent me care packages all the time with Lucky Charms because that was my favorite thing. And everybody else used to buy them all and I never got to eat them, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, she was just a dear, sweet woman. Well, she passed away while I was over in Italy and I went to the Pentagon afterwards. So I buy the house, my dad moves in, and there was a rose bush in their backyard. My dad did not want to leave it at the house, and because it meant everything to him. Miss Carolyn used to go out and pick roses and put them on her table. And it is one of those southern rose bushes that if you walk by it, you can smell rose everywhere. It is just a very, very fragrant bush. And so my dad dug it up and it is in the middle of my backyard. And it is a humongous, I mean, it's like 7 feet tall. It's big around. It's like 6 feet around. And of course, it gets lots of love and care. But my husband will go out there and cut a rose off of that and bring it into me. And almost every time he does that, it makes me cry because I'm a daddy's girl and I love my dad and I miss him horribly. And so, yeah, roses, especially, but flowers in general, is just a way to touch someone's heart that you really care about. And my husband knows that, and he knows what that rose bush means to me. So it's awesome. All right. And I made it through that without a single tear. Let's see what else we got. Alpha Warriors Rumble channel, and he has done lots of those videos. Yes, we have. I love me some Alpha. Trump likes to put people front and center. You're absolutely right. Grady Judd. Yes, we love Grady Judd. Started doing 10 minutes or less videos. Yeah, Bridget made me do it. I'm going to give her all the glory. That's what she said we needed to do to reach more people. And damn if she wasn't right. She's always right when it comes to this tech stuff. She's very, very good at what she does. Let's see. What else? I don't think she simulcast. I don't know how to simulcast. I don't even know if it's a thing. I think people that do like those studios where you can do it, they have a technician in the studio that has the X up and the Rumble thing. And then they can be doing the questions and answering logged in as the host while someone's doing the Rumble. I just cannot do both at the same time. I can't keep up with this chat and look at the raised hands over here. It's just too much. If I had somebody here with me, that would be a completely different story. But I'm like stressed out like 30 minutes before this, getting this pulled up, get that pulled up, get everything done. So that ain't ever going to happen. Because again, we're not in this for the money. We're in this to share truth. All right. Mager Sarge. COG and Coup devolution transfers power, authority, and responsibility to lower levels when higher headquarters cannot effectively manage FEMA regions than states. Yeah, that's the devolution option. I mean, there's other continuity of government plans like moving the command and control segments to the underground bunkers and stuff like that. There's, like I said, there's 4 or 5 major continuity of government plans. Devolution is just one. And that's basically if the command and control is gone. There is a BCCI bank in Panama. Yeah, so the BCCI didn't actually go away, but Panama sued BCCI. I actually found the court case today. They sued America's 3 branches of BCCI, and their court case was thrown out based on a whole bunch of dumb stuff. But Panama sued because Noriega was being paid through the BCCI bank, and he was money laundering money coming from the United States in aid into the BCCI bank in Panama, and they were putting it in his personal accounts and other BCCI branches for him. They were money laundering for him. And so the people of Panama sued the United States as a result of that. And like I said, they didn't win the lawsuit, but they should have, because BCCI was in fact doing that. And the Clark Clifford guy and all that other stuff, Altman, they all covered it up. Let's see. Congratulations on the contact with Paul Williams, the dude, Donnie Vision. I love it. Yeah. So the above is from General Flynn. Okay. Yep. Okay. What? Oh, Patriot Girl. Come on. What is Operation Gladio? Yeah, definitely need to get her our link. You're on our Rumble channel, Patriot Girl. All you have to do is go link on any of our Operation Gladio 101 links. There's several in. I did one with War Hamster, and I've done several with other people. Just go click on one of those. It'll blow your mind. All right. Let's see. I've heard you a couple of times on Badlands, but never caught your background, if you don't mind sharing. Sure. This is my background right here. This whole wall outlines my background. I spent 30 years. Let's see if I can get that. 30 years on active duty. That kind of, all of this is kind of tells my whole story, actually. That's my shadow box. I started off, you can see here as an airman, basic, with nothing. 1, 2, 3, made staff sergeant, got my commission up here, second lieutenant, then went all the way over here to colonel. Those are all of my campaign medals. I can't get my fingers doing in the right direction. This is from my assignment at the Air Staff. That was from my assignment at CENTCOM. That's my last organization. I had my own coin as a commander, and my name insignia towner, my Air Staff tour, my dog tags that I deployed with, and a whole bunch of coins up there from General Franks, the SecDef, and people like that I met along the way. I have General Colin Powell's coin up there before I found out he was a dirtbag. So anyway, yeah, 30 years in the Air Force, and I retired quite a while ago and just kind of stumbled across Operation Gladio in doing some nonfiction reading, and here we are. So that's it in a nutshell. And actually, the very first sit rep I ever did on Badlands Media, we went into my background, the whole, like, my deployments, all that stuff. People want it. It's still on the internet under their channel on Badlands under SitRep. If you guys want to go look at that. Okay. What else? Gladio is an international crime syndicate going for globalism. And yeah, pink and gold. So Gladio is not the international crime syndicate. So you've got the syndicate. They created Gladio under NATO. With Gladio is really just the paramilitary aspect of this global syndicate. They have a whole lot of them. Gladio is really just the paramilitary piece of this that we kind of focus on. And as such, it encompasses all of the intelligence communities that were set up after World War II, like the CIA, the German BND, the Korean KCIA, Taiwan's intelligence, the ISI, and Pakistan, all of those. The only one that was not created post-World War II was MI6. And that's kind of the granddaddy master controller of the paramilitary aspect of all of this. And so there's more facets to it. You have the whole, if you look at it from like a power structure where you have the economic, political, and military power structure, Operation Gladio is the military piece of that, but there's an entire economic hit team that works in the IMF, the World Bank, and all of the central banks that attack a target in an economic way. And then you also have the political, the State Department elements, USAID, National Endowment for Democracy. They attack them. So it's always a three-prong attack. And Gladio is the paramilitary piece of that. And it's just because I have the most background in the military, why I focus on that. When you see the other pieces being used, we will call them out, but we tend to focus on just the Gladio part. Design Academy. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys a secret. Okay, we are maybe a week away. So this is a secret. Nobody else knows this. But I will let you guys know. Hold on just a second. I got to find my daughter's. She's doing this for me. We are going to have a coin. I am in the final stages. I have the one side 100% designed. And let's see. We have a t-shirt designed. Let me see. That's what the coin is going to look like on the first side. You see the eagle clutching the dagger because we're going to take, gladio is the French for dagger. That's what it means, a short sword, dagger. The eagle, which is me, the colonel, is going to defeat gladio, which is the sword. Okay, so this is going to be one side of our coin. And we are going to design, we're in the process of designing the other side. Now, I'm going to show you what our first shirt is going to look like. Our first shirt is going to have on the front side of it, the coin emblem around like where you would have a breast pocket. And then on the back, we're going to have the glasses that I've not even showed this to Bridget yet. Okay. The Colonel's Corner and our Gladio glasses. That's going to be the first shirt. All right. Then I'm going to use Bridget's other design. We've got a couple. Like I like this one here for the back of the shirt. And we've got that one. Okay. And my favorite is this one. It's got Trump's head with binoculars and it says Operation Gladio on it. I don't know if you guys can see it. That's like my favorite one. So that's probably going to be shirt number 2 with the binoculars, Operation Gladio everywhere you look. But I did have one more. Let me see if I can find that. Now I got all these stupid videos. Can you read that? If you don't want the truth, don't ask me. If you want something sugar-coated, go eat a donut and have Operation Gladio on the front, because this is me. This is me. Now, I probably won't put that on a shirt anytime soon, but if you don't want the truth, don't ask me, because you're going to get 100% the truth, and it is not going to be sugar-coated. Sorry. I want a coin. All right. Well, we're going to work on the coins. I do have to do the other side. We're still in the kind of going back and forth because I don't have it exactly the way I want it, but it is going to be an eagle that's associated with that as well. So anyway, fun times. And then my daughter's going to do all of that because I don't know how to do any of that. And hopefully at some point, the only reason I really wanted to do that was so that I can kind of recoup some of the money that I've spent on these books, because it's a lot. It is such a lot of money. And I mean, obviously, Bridget, I would have loved to have paid her for the bookshelf in some way, in order to hold all of those books. And so if we could just break even, that's what we're looking for here, is to be able to do that. But at the same time, give you guys something that you could wear in public and people would ask you, hey, what's Operation Gladio? And that way, the more people that we can get brought into the fold as far as what this is, go eat a donut. Yeah. Anyway. All right, that's it. So y'all have the secrets. Don't be telling everybody. We'll share with them when we get a little closer. I think probably next week we'll have the information out. What's that say, Colonel? The coin should have the guy. They live looking over his Gladio glasses. Okay, I'll think about it. Alpha must have one, and Ghost and CanCon. Yes, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, what I may do is have a modeling contest. I'm going to have them, if we could send them a shirt, and then we will have their wives take pictures of them in the shirt, and we'll use them on the internet shopping basket. They'll be my male models. Oh, I love it. You guys are bad. You're going to get me in trouble. Anyway, okay. We're out of here. Thank you very much for being here. I'll see you tonight on the pond, or the Colonel's Corner after dark. See you later.